من راست میگی یه پیرمرد نیست.
Okay, is everyone ready?
Ahí está, no empezar a ver. Pero no estás en mute. Toca ahí.
¿Por qué mute?
Tocas. No, que no van a ver aquí.
Toco.
Toca la pantalla.
Okay, so this is the second part of our series entitled "Did It Really Happen?" And this is we're going to discuss tonight. Sorry about that. So we began last week a very important discussion on the topic of the authenticity of the Torah. And what we're focused mainly on tonight, we're focused mainly on this series, on these few lectures, is the event at Sinai. I would like to ask, before I begin, if everyone can mute their phones or their computers so that we don't hear the background music. So we focused on the topic, on the question that we were addressing is, and the idea that we wanted to make clear was that the event that is recorded in the Torah, in the 5 books of Moses, that happened at Sinai, where God revealed himself to Moses in front of the entire Jewish people, is an event that is indisputable. It is beyond shadow of doubt that event happened. And I started this last Thursday night, and we had a lengthy discussion. I don't know how many of you that are watching now watched it last Thursday night, but for the benefit of those who did not, and probably for those who did, it's probably a good idea to do a quick synopsis on what we spoke about last Thursday, in part 1. So we laid out a few important fundamentals, and that is, number 1, anything that we talk today is based on the premise that God created the world, that there is a God and that he created the world. I take it for granted, or at least it's based on the premise that we all accept. Now, if he created the world, then he obviously created it for a reason. He had some purpose that he wanted to get out of this world. And part of that purpose is mankind. In other words, there's a reason for us being here, and there's something we need to do here. Which leads us to the next obvious conclusion, that if he has a job for us to do, that he would not keep that job secret from us. It means if he put us here for a reason, he would, of course, tell us what that is, so that we can do that job. He doesn't expect us to guess, to figure it out on our own. There's no way we could figure it out on our own. So he must have, if he had this purpose, and we're part of that purpose, it's just logical to conclude that he would have shared that information with mankind. I say this because oftentimes people come at this question, did Sinai really happen? And people come at it as if it's some great novelty that God should speak to man and reveal his will to mankind. And from my perspective, and I think as a logical perspective, that should not come at any surprise to anyone. In fact, it would be highly unlikely and very surprising had God not spoken to man and told mankind what he wants from it, what he wants from mankind. Because again, it's based on the premise that he created mankind with a purpose for man, and they are part of that purpose. So it's inconceivable that he would hold the information back from us. It's like you hire a secretary for your business, and she shows up the first day, and she says, "Okay, what do I do now?" And you say, "Well, I'm not going to tell you. Figure it out on your own." Well, in a secretarial job, maybe the secretary can figure it out on her own, because there's many, many other secretaries from whom she can find out what this boss wants. Well, even though it would be most ridiculous for a boss, any boss, to hire someone and not tell them what that job is. How much more so with God, when there's no other people, there are no other mankind that we can ask, by the way, you were created before us, what does God want from you? If he never spoke to anyone, how is anyone supposed to know? So it's highly unlikely that God would leave this information secret from us. It's impossible. So therefore, the event, the idea that God would speak to mankind should come as no surprise. It is the most obvious thing that should have happened at some time in mankind's history. Now, I also said that in order for God to speak to mankind, and that it should be a successful communication, so that mankind knows conclusively, without doubt, that this is what he wants, this is what it is, and there should be no doubt ever again as to the authenticity of what God wants. I'd like to ask once again if you can mute your computers. I will, of course, open this up for questions at certain intervals, but for now I beg, please, because you can hear background, it's disturbing. And therefore, if God is going to communicate with mankind, he would have to do it. It's obvious that he would do it in such a way where it leaves no question as to the authenticity of what he wants. In other words, if he's going to communicate with mankind, only that a week later, mankind should once again, or a year or 200 years later, mankind is once again in the dark as to what he wants, then God failed miserably, and God would not subject himself or us to that kind of confusion and failure. So it's obvious that if he's going to communicate with us, with the people, with mankind, he's going to do it in such a way where it leaves no doubt. He does it once and for all, as we say. Because just imagine if he communicates with, let's say, Moses, and then 100 years later someone else by the name of David comes along and says, I just spoke to God and he told me a whole different set of rules for everyone to do. And 100 years after that, someone comes and says, well, I just spoke to God somewhere else, and he came to me in the middle of my dream, or when I was up, in the middle of the night, wherever, and he told me a third set of rules, and he canceled out the first set of rules. I mean, you can imagine that if that kind of situation would happen, it would just leave mankind in complete and utter confusion. So it would be unbecoming from God. It's not logical to suggest that God would communicate to man in a way that it can leave us in the dark, even after he has made that communication. What does that mean? What that means is, as I spoke about this all last week, what that means is that he had to communicate with man in such a way where there's no doubt. How do you do that? How can you ascertain that there's never going to be a doubt as to the authenticity of this? That can only happen if he talks to everyone present. You see, if he spoke to one man on a mountaintop or in his basement or wherever, and this, even a very worthy man, a very trusted man or woman, and that person comes and says, God revealed himself to me on a mountain while I was strolling around, and he came to me and told him, I want you to give over an important message to all mankind and to all the Jewish people, and I want them to start keeping kosher and to observe the Sabbath and to be nice to each other and not to steal and so on. All the set of rules that we have. Well, that is a problem if he would do it just in front to one person and rely that that person would convey the message. Because, first of all, how do we know that that person is telling the truth? Number one. And even if he is telling the truth, what happens if, like I said, 100 years later or 5 days later, someone else comes, another guy, and says, I spoke to God just yesterday, and he told me that, oh, by the way, the tefillin that I told you to wear, you don't have to do it anymore. From now on, you have to wear marbles on your head. And and so on and so forth, and that just continues, and no one knows the truth anymore. So it's obvious that God has to, if he wants this to be a successful project, he had to speak to the entire community, to the entire people all at once, so that everyone hears him, everyone sees him, everyone is aware this happened, we were witness to it, there's no question about it. And at the time that God does this, he says to mankind, by the way, and he did this is what's recorded in the Torah. God tells us no one has the right ever in the future, in the history of mankind, in the future of mankind, no one has the right to ever say to you that I have met him on a mountaintop or in a cave or wherever and told him that the rules are going to change. If that does happen, if a prophet comes to you and says that he came to me, God came to me and told me that the rules have changed, you are to put him to death. That's how severe this is. And you wonder, such a punishment? The answer is yes, because if that happens, then the entire project of creation goes up in smoke. Meaning to say, God's purpose can never be fulfilled. Because it's going to leave mankind in utter confusion. So the first thing God did was he had to do is speak to everyone at once, not to one person or to a group of 5 people or whatever, because that's nice, maybe, who knows, you can never know if it really happened or not. So you'll have some people that will believe it, some people will be skeptical. He had to do it in such a way where it leaves no skepticism. And he also said at the same time, this is a one-time thing. I'm never, ever going to reveal myself again to an individual to tell them anything different. So that we know, forever and ever, this is it, there's no more, there's no changing of the mind, there's no changing of the guard. And that's the basis, that's what we have presented last week. Now the thing is, now you and me, all of you watching me tonight, not I and not you were at Mount Sinai when this happened. So you can ask, how do we know that this happened? It's a nice tale, it's a nice story that someone told us that's written in the Bible, and my father told it to me and his father told it to him, and but who knows if this really ever happened? Maybe someone made this up. Maybe someone made up a nice story and sold it to the Jewish people, a primitive, gullible people. They believed him, and and the story got around and made its rounds, and now here we are, doing Jewish life. Well, the truth of the matter is, that's a convenient question. It is a good question. But if you really think about it, this question is not thought through. Why do I say that? I say that because when you really come down to it and you start articulating that question in further detail, you quickly realize that the question is not really a valid one. Because what does that mean exactly? What you're saying is, someone that asks that question, basically he or she is saying, it's quite possible that Sinai never really happened. There were no 2 million people that stood at the mountain. And for the most part, probably there were no 2 million people that left Egypt in the grand exodus. It's all, Snow White and the 7 dwarfs. It's another tale, a cute story that someone came up with. So we need to answer, we need to figure out, could that possibly be that someone made this up? Could that be? So, there's 2 points of view. You have 2 types of Bible critics. You have one type of Bible critic that says, the story never happened, this nonsense, stop wasting my time and yours. You bunch of fools, you believe in this nonsense, God spoke to mankind, split the sea, dropped manna from heaven. What are you talking about? This is, come on, wake up. That's one kind of Bible critic. There's another Bible critic that says, maybe something did happen, But the Jewish people were primitive and a little gullible, so let's say, for example, the splitting of the sea. They got all excited, the waters opened up for them, and they crossed the sea, and they thought it was some miraculous event. But, we know today that wasn't really God, there was no miracle. It was a natural phenomenon called low tide. The waters receded, and that happens in nature. And that happened when they, when they were there. Okay, that's a different kind of Bible critic. What's the difference between those two? The difference is, one is a little reasonable, or tries to be reasonable. The other one is completely not reasonable. The reason is because, and this is something I also spoke about last week, and I want to just reiterate it. That is that a story, let me ask you something. Here we are living through, all of us today in 2020, are living through something very historic. The coronavirus is an historic event. I ask you, how are the people that are going to be living in the year 3020? That means in 1,000 years from now. How are they going to know that this happened? That there was a time 1,000 years ago that coronavirus broke out, the pandemic, and it created havoc and so on. How are the people in 1,000 years going to know about this? Well, you'll say it's going to be they're going to be able to bring it up on the internet and find it on the New York Times, right? It's going to be recorded. Right? Is that what you would say? Probably. But really, when you get down to it, I'm not sure that is really the way that people are going to have an absolute belief that this happened. Because we all know that you can manipulate the internet, and you can make all kinds of things look like an old newspaper. You can manipulate, and you can write up a story that never really happened, and you can bring it up, and oh boy, here it is. It's right here in the New York Times of 2020. That is not how people are going to be convinced that an event like coronavirus took place 1,000 years earlier. The reason they're going to know about it unequivocally, they're going to absolutely know that this happened without doubt, is because everyone today alive is going to be talking about it. We see it, we're experiencing it, and we're telling it, we're going to be talking about it, and it's going to be recorded during our time, and we're going to be telling this to our children, and our children are going to tell it to their children, and all the way down till the year 3030, it's going to go down from one generation to the next in an unbroken chain of tradition that this happened. And therefore, anyone that's going to say in 1,000 years that this never happened, no one's going to take such a person serious, because a story like this could never be made up. You can't make up a story like this. Imagine today we want to make up a story that coronavirus happened. Would anyone believe it? Let's say someone today came to you and said, by the way, in the year 1812, there was an outbreak of a pandemic all across Europe, a corona, called it whatever you call it, and it killed 1 million people, and everyone was locked up in their houses for 2 months or who knows how long, and the world economy crashed, and this whole massive event, right? You're not going to believe it. You know why you're not going to believe it? Because if that happened, why didn't my father ever hear about this event? And why didn't my neighbor's father ever hear about this event? And why didn't anyone hear about this event? If it was a massive event that happened and all the world knew about it at the time, it would have come down to it. We would have heard about it. Such a thing can never be forgotten. And now suddenly you're telling me that this happened. So those stories of this kind of magnitude could never be made up. And try to make up a story. Put yourself in the shoes. Imagine someone came to you. Let's say you're living in the year 500 BCE. And no one ever heard of a biblical story, and no one ever heard about Mount Sinai, no one ever heard about any of this. And someone comes to you, let's say 500 years before the Common Era, and tries to make up this story, which is what these Bible critics are trying, these unreasonable Bible critics, are trying to suggest that it's a fairy tale, never happened, someone made it up. What does it mean someone made it up? That means someone at some point made this up, out of thin air. And you think that people around him are going to believe a story that happened in front of, at the way they're telling it, is that 2 million people witnessed it. You think anyone's going to believe that 2 million people witnessed the story and no one ever heard of it? Never happened. It's impossible that such a thing should happen. So therefore, such a story, it's impossible that this happened, that this could be made up. That's why I say that Jews come at this, at the topic of what happened at Sinai, not from a faith point of view. It's not from a faith point of view that we take this. This to us is history. It's just like any other history. It's not like if someone says, I believe that Alexander the Great conquered the world, you can say, wow, this is a believer and he has a faith. He has faith in something. It's not faith. That is not faith. You're going to say Christopher Columbus discovered America. That's some kind of faith. It's part of history. Everyone knows it. It's when at the time they recorded it and it started. They told their children until it comes to us. That's not faith. That's not religion. That's fact. That's history. So therefore, our belief in Mount Sinai is not from a religious standpoint so much. It's from a basic historical standpoint, and it's a crucially important point to understand and ponder. Now, I want to talk about another issue that relates to this, of course, and that is it a good thing to believe people when they say, I spoke to God? Is that a good thing? Is that something we should promote, so that when someone comes to you and says, I spoke to God yesterday, should we believe that? Is that something that the Torah expects us to do? Is that a positive attribute, that to say, I believe when people tell me they spoke to God? Or is that foolish? What do you think? Well, the fact of the matter is that there are billions of people that believe stories like that. Billions, not millions, billions. There are 1 billion adherents to the Christian religion who basically believe a story that happened to one individual or to 12 individuals, and they believe it. There are another 200 million people who believe that in Islam, basically, they believe that a person who claims that he had a prophetic vision, they believe him. Is this a positive? Is this a good thing? Let's talk about us. Forget the Christians and the Muslims. Let's talk about Jews. Is it a good thing to believe when people say, I spoke to God? Is this an expectation that mankind should follow such people? What do you think? So I got news for you, and I mentioned this briefly last week. Moses, when he was sent to Egypt, God told him to make a sign for the Jewish people, to get them to believe that he's legit. What was the sign? That he would throw a stick onto the ground and it would become a snake, a serpent. And then he would grab hold of its tail and it would turn into a stick once again. And he gave him another one or two signs beyond that. And his message was, go to Egypt, and if they're skeptical that maybe you never really spoke to me on this mountain at the burning bush, do this in front of them, they'll believe you. But as I mentioned to you, the Jews, Moses was very unhappy with this. And the Rambam, Maimonides, and I read to you that text last week, the Rambam makes that very clear, that Moses was very skeptical of this. He knew that people who believe in miracles are not going, that's not a long-term, it's not real, it doesn't penetrate, it doesn't change lives. That's not the way you convince people of something real. And he told God, really, this is how it's going to work? You're going to have them, I'm going to make a miracle in front of them, and you expect them to follow me because I can make a miracle? A lot of people can make miraculous things happen, and it's through black magic, through all kinds of things. You know the story that the necromancers in Egypt themselves did those kinds of things. Moses throws the stick on the ground, and the necromancers did the same exact thing, and it worked for them. That means that, you can do people can do all kinds of things. Does that mean that I should suddenly believe you and follow you and accept from you a whole new religious doctrine? I mean, what? And Moses was very worried about this. He knew that there's something wrong with this. Because you should not follow people just because they said so. And the truth is, people don't. Usually people don't. It was only when God told him, you're right, this is not the long term. They're not going to believe in you because you threw a stick and it turned into a snake. That'll get them out of Egypt. They'll follow you out of Egypt till Mount Sinai. But then, over there, I'm going to do something that will solidify their faith in you forever. What is that something? God spoke to Moses in front of all of us. Now, they don't need to believe in Moses anymore because he said so. We believe in Moses because we saw God spoke to him. God speak to him. Then they started finally believing in him for real. And that's the only way it should be. And that's what God is saying to the Jewish people. If anyone ever comes to you in the future and tries to sell you a boat, or a story, or a religious doctrine, or whatever, and tells you that because he can make a miracle and do something extraordinary or supernatural, you should now start following him and his new ways, that's a dangerous place to be. Because you have a dime a dozen. Like I said, you have billions of people believing in all kinds of stuff. That doesn't make them true. So if you're looking for numbers, if you're measuring this by numbers, you're an outsider, an alien, for example, an alien comes into Earth, into this world and wants to now see what's the right, what's the way to follow. Well, he's probably not going to follow Judaism too fast because this is being observed by only 15 million people, whereas all the other religions have massive numbers. So if you're going by numbers, you're going to follow the other religions. But what you have to do is you have to look at the origins of these doctrines. Judaism starts starts with a historical event that was witnessed by 2 million people who cannot make up a story like that. That's the validity of Judaism. And only that. All the rest stands on the shoulders of that first event. That means to say, we of course believe in many of the prophets. We don't only believe in Moses. We believe in Joshua. We believe in Samuel. We believe in all the prophets. There are many prophets that we believe in. We believe in all kinds of stories and miraculous events and messages that they came and told us. But you know why we do? You know why we believe the story of Jonah, and you know why we believe the story of Elisha, who did miracles? We believe in them because the Torah told us to believe in them. Because Moses told us, now that I'm speaking the word of God, God told me to tell you that future prophets will arise among the Jewish people, and you have to accept their word if they follow the Torah and they are legitimate, and there's no reason to suspect that they are making up a story. So it's all based on the revelation at Sinai. Now, here comes an important question, which I did not address last week. That is, okay, granted, I'll accept that the story happened. It's a fact of history, hard to deny. A story that millions of Jews say they heard from their father all the way back in an unbroken chain till Moses, till the time when it happened at Mount Sinai, 2 million people. We'll do that. By the way, I want to go back to something I said before, that there are the more reasonable Bible critics who say, for example, about the story of the splitting of the sea, low tide, right? They say they explain it natural. That was a natural phenomenon. Why don't they just say, you're crazy, it's a stupid story, it never happened? Because of everything I just said, they know that that's impossible, that a story like this would come down to our time if it never happened. You can, with the sun, they know that it's impossible to make up a story like this. That 2 million people walked across the sea. You can't make up a story like that. So what they try to do is they say that probably happened. Something happened. It's a historical event, but it's not a miracle. Calm down. Nothing. It's not. It's not the type of miracle that there was no God. It's not God. It's not. Yeah, it was a natural phenomenon. Tsunamis happen. All kinds of things happen in nature. That was a natural event. Fine. You can argue that. You can have an argument with someone like that, because then you have to explain to the person that that they have to look deeper into the details of the story that came down to us. The story as it came down to us, as witnessed by the 2 million people, was not something of a low tide phenomenon. They clearly said they walked on dry land. Low tide is not dry land. So if you look into the story, you see a very different story. It's not one that describes a low tide phenomenon. So that's already a detail. That's already a detail. Now, did we hear from God the 613 commandments? We did not. We heard from God only the 10 commandments. Well, actually, let me be a little more specific about that. It's interesting that the sages tell us that the way it happened was that there were quite some interesting miracles that happened at Mount Sinai. First, God uttered all 10 commandments in one single utterance, and that all of us heard. But your ears can hear a mumble. I don't know what it sounded like when there are 620 words in the 10 commandments. When you look into the Bible, the 10 commandments, the way it's written is 620 words. I think that's the number. So imagine you hear 620 words all at once. So in the physical ear of the Jew, of the person, would probably sound like one big mumble jumble. So I don't remember it. We were all there, by the way. It says the souls of every Jew was there. But leave that aside. So our physical bodies weren't there, but those 2 million people were there physically. So I don't know exactly how they heard that first utterance as it came out. But then, of course, God started speaking the 10 commandments, each commandment individually, so that the human ear can hear that. And those of that, we heard only the first 2. What happened was, we heard God say, "I'm God, your Lord," and you should believe in God. But could you imagine you're a human being and you're hearing God speak to you? What do you think would happen to you if you experienced something like that? Well, I'll tell you what happened to them. They had an out-of-body experience. They couldn't handle it. They couldn't handle it. And they died. It says their souls flew out of their bodies. It was such a spiritual experience that their bodies and this there was too much of a, it was impossible for them to fully grasp it, and they lost it. And says they all died. And God had to bring them back to life. And then he uttered the second commandment. And that happened again. They were not capable of hearing a direct communication from God. So again, their souls left their bodies. It flew out. It was too much for them. Such a spiritual experience for physical people, it was too much. They couldn't handle it. There was too much of a schism between the spiritual, the spiritual divine revelation that took place and their physical bodies. They couldn't. So their bodies, their souls left their bodies. They died again, and God brought them back to life a second time. And then they told Moses, "You know what? This is too much for us. We can't handle this. We know you're legitimate because we heard the first 2 commandments. We heard God speak to you, so we don't no longer have any doubt that you're it. Do us a favor, you go get the rest and tell us what God told you, and we'll accept it because we know you're legitimate." And that's what happened. Moses went up the mountain for 40 days and 40 nights, and God gave him basically the rest of the Torah. But it's interesting, and I want to take you a little further in this journey, and here's where it becomes a little interesting. God, how did God give the Torah to the Jewish people? Let's try to narrow this down. So he's speaking to Moses, right? He's giving him 613 commandments. And he tells Moshe, I want you to write down the 613 commandments and some other stories that I want written in the 5 books, in the original 5 books of the Bible. Stories of creation, the story of Noah and the flood, the story of Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, the story of the Exodus, and other events that happened during the 40-year sojourn in the desert. All that is in the Bible. All that is in the 5 books of Moses, in addition to the 613 commandments. So God tells Moshe exactly word for word what to write in this Torah scroll. And Moshe writes it down, and he writes actually 13 Torah scrolls. He writes 13 Torah scrolls, and he gives 1 Torah scroll to each tribe, because there are 12 tribes, and the 13th he puts into the temple for safekeeping. Now that's the Torah that we have in our arks in the synagogues that we have today. That's the original 5 books of Moses, the way wrote, the word for word, the way Moses wrote it. But in addition to that, and listen to me carefully, in addition to that, God gave Moshe an entire oral explanation to all the mitzvahs. What do I mean by that? Let me explain what I mean by that. Let's take, for example, the mitzvah to affix a mezuzah on your doorpost. You all know that mitzvah, right? Okay? I'm going to give you another example. The mitzvah that on the holiday of Sukkot, we should shake the 4 species of fruit and plants, what we call the lulav and the etrog. Okay, so let's take those 2 mitzvahs. Writing mezuzah and affixing it on our doorpost, and to shake the lulav and the etrog on Sukkot. When you open up the Bible, these are 2 biblical mitzvahs. They're in the Bible, in the 5 books of Moses. So when you open up the 5 books of Moses and you look, where does it say that we should put a mezuzah on our doorpost? Anyone know? Well, we say it in the Shema every day. We actually, though that's a very famous line because we say it every day more than once. It's 5 words in the Bible. Uchsaftam al mezuzot beitecha uvisharecha. You should write them, which means you should write them on the doorposts of your homes and on your gates. Now, imagine Moses comes down the mountain and he tells the Jewish people those 5 words. You should write them on your doorposts of your house and on your gates. And the Jewish people, okay, let's go home and let's start writing them. And let's start doing it. Do they have any idea what they should do? From those 5 words alone, would you know what to do? Would you know how to fulfill that mitzvah? I doubt it. First of all, what should I write? It doesn't say what you should write. It says you should write them. What is them? What should I write on the doorpost of my house? The 10 Commandments, the story of creation. What am I writing on my door? What is written in the mezuzah? It doesn't say that in the Torah. So Moses comes down with these 5 words, and we're left in the dark. We have no idea what to do. So that's a problem, no? Now let's go back to the other example, to the mitzvah of one second. To the mitzvah of shaking a lulav and a netrog. So if you open up the Bible, the 5 books of Moses, the Torah, you take it out of the ark, and you start looking, where does it say to do this? So I'll tell you where it says. It says it in the book of Leviticus towards the end. It's actually going to be in next week's Torah portion. What does it say over there? You should take, on the first day of the holiday of Sukkot, you should take a beautiful fruit. That's what it says. It doesn't say you should take a citrus fruit, which what we use as an etrog. So Moses comes down the mountain and says, one of the mitzvahs is that on the holiday of Sukkot, you should take a beautiful fruit. Okay, what's a beautiful fruit? Some people say beautiful fruit, that must be a pineapple. I love that fruit, that looks beautiful. Others might say, that may be a kiwi. Kiwi is gorgeous. And others may say it is a red delicious apple. What is a beautiful fruit? But it's interesting? The interesting thing is that it never happened in the last 3,300 years since the Torah was given that a Jew should take on the holiday of Sukkot anything but an etrog, which is a citron. How did that happen? How is it that Jews argue about everything? We can't agree on anything almost. And on this vague mitzvah, we have total agreement. Everyone takes a citron. Have you ever thought of that? Well, I'll tell you why that is. And why it also happened that Jews know exactly what we should write on our doorposts. There's no question about it. Everyone knows. How do we know this? Well, Moses told us. How does Moses know? It's not in the Torah, it's not in the words that God gave him. And here comes a very important point. That together with the written Torah that God gave Moses, that he dictated to him word for word what to write down, he also told him an entire oral explanation. God actually told him, when I say a beautiful fruit, I mean a citron. And when I say you shall write them on the doorposts of your homes, here's what you should write. The first two portions of the Shema. He gave him the exact section of the Torah what to write. He told him what I mean. He didn't leave him in the dark. And that's what we call the oral tradition, the oral Torah. In other words, in those 40 days that Moses was up on the mountains receiving from God the entire Torah, he received from him not only the written Torah, but together with it an oral explanation. So that we know what to do. Now, you may ask a question. Why did God not tell Moshe to write the whole thing down? Why does any part have to be oral? Let it be all written down. The question is a very important question, not just, from a philosophical standpoint, it's also from a practical standpoint. You know the danger in giving something over orally. There's an obvious question that many people ask. And that is, how do we know that when Moshe told the first generation of Jews in the desert didn't get watered down, like they say, broken telephone? You know the thing of the concept of broken telephone? So how do we know that what we're doing today and what we have today is the same words that God told Moses, and especially the oral part? The oral part was given over orally. So who says that we didn't undergo what we call today a broken telephone? That means like this, that the first generation heard it from Moses pretty much accurately, but then as they transferred that or related that to the next generation, more or less accurately, and then the third generation already a little bit less, the thing grew a beard, subtracted, you know what happens when you give over a message. Today in one day, I'm on WhatsApp, right? Today we have the WhatsApp, right? I don't believe anything I see on WhatsApp. You know why? Because 99% of what you see on WhatsApp is not true. Because the story grows a beard, not in 3,000 years, in 3 minutes. I mean this quite literally. You cannot believe what you see on WhatsApp for the most part, because it's mostly not true. Now that happens in one day, in a matter of a few hours or a day, a couple of days, the story completely changed. So imagine over 3,000 years a transmission of oral Torah down to our time. Could you imagine how much dilution could have happened to this message? That's a good question. And that's a very valid question. So it takes me back to the earlier point I made. If that could happen, then once again, God messed this thing up. We're talking about God here. God wants to convey his message to mankind, his purpose for creation. So we already established that there's only one way he can do it, and that is to talk to entire people at once. So there's no confusion. Everyone saw it, everyone's convinced, no question about it. But if it can happen, and the reason we need that, with the premise we laid down was, because otherwise we're left with confusion. And God wants us to know what he wants from us unequivocally. So there must have been a way where he can convey this message to mankind in a way that he can trust that it will reach our day and age in the year 2020 without dilution. How did he do that? How could we be so certain that what we have today is what 50 generations ago had, or 100 generations ago? So to answer this, it requires a number of detailed information. Number one, okay, so let's start like this. Let me ask you a question. Why didn't God just write everything down? Why did he tell Moses to this part write down and the rest pass over orally? Well, the answer to that is quite an obvious one. Could you imagine the Torah would have a Torah? What's that? Imagine we would have a Torah scroll that had all the details in it. And we would have to read one portion every week. You know how long the Torah reading would be every week? It would take the whole week. Because there would be so much in there. The Torah scroll would be infinitely, it would be so long, it would be unreasonable to do such a thing. It's too much to write. The oral part was so extensive that it would make no sense to write all that down in one Torah scroll. It's too much. So it's obvious why God told him write certain parts, the basic information about every mitzvah, and some of the history, some of the stories in the Bible that I want in there, because there's important messages in those stories, and the rest you'll pass over word of mouth. Okay, so now I know why we couldn't write everything down. It's not practical. But again, we're left with the worry, how do you make sure that what you're passing down orally remains loyal to the original message? In other words, it's the same what we received. So for this, you have to appreciate a little bit how the written Torah works. The written Torah, as I mentioned, is the Bible, the 5 books of Moses. If you read the 5 books of Moses, the part with the mitzvahs, you will pay attention that every mitzvah is written in almost shorthand. It is so abbreviated that it is almost no mitzvah that when you read it just out of the Bible, you know what to do. It's so vague, it's so unclear that it requires a oral explanation. But the way it's written is written in shorthand. What do I mean by shorthand? Almost code words. Like, how does the Torah tell us that he doesn't want us to eat milk together with meat? Did you know how the Torah told that to us? Also 5 words. But instead of just telling us, don't eat milk together with meat, which would be a very simple statement which we can all understand, and there would be no confusion. Instead, God told Moses to write, "Don't cook a kid in his mother's milk." Right? That's the way the mitzvah, or the sin, the prohibition of mixing milk and meat is written in the Bible. Don't cook a kid in his mother's milk. I cannot think of a more bizarre way to write down, "Don't eat milk with meat," by saying it in such a funny way. Don't cook a kid, meaning a kid is a goat, in his mother's milk. Why a goat? Why his mother? What is going on over here? Just say, don't cook or eat milk together with milk. And I know I shouldn't eat milk together with meat. But if you take a look in the Talmud, how the rabbis analyzed this verse, you will find something extraordinary. That in these 5 words, God embedded dozens of different laws regarding the prohibition of milk and meat. And in every word lies another 2-3 laws that we learn from an extra letter, an extra word. So now, think of it this way. Had God just said, "Don't eat milk and meat," that's straightforward, you're right, but it's very limiting. How do I know I'm not allowed to cook milk together with meat? Maybe I'm not allowed to eat it, but maybe I'm allowed to cook it together and serve it to my cleaning lady who's not Jewish. Right? So it says cook. And I don't want to go into all the details of this particular law with you because it would take too long and it's a little nuanced and it would be. But my point, why am I giving you this example? What God did was He wanted to make sure that the oral code would be remembered. How does He make that? How does He ascertain and make certain that no one will forget the oral code? He embeds it into the written code. He writes the written code in such a way where every word reminds you, hints you about another aspect of what was given over orally. So if they ever forget any aspect of the written law, of the oral law, all they have to do is look into this code book, which is the Bible, and read it again, and they'll remind themselves right away. Because it's written in such a strange way, in such a code way, in such a mystified way, that the very words remind you of the hints to the oral tradition. Now, what happened? This went on for 1,300 years, where there was a written Torah, and the oral tradition was passed down by word of mouth from generation to generation. And don't forget, it was given over in a way where it wasn't just philosophy. They were actually observing these laws. So it was much easier to remember also, because when you're doing something, you don't forget, right? But then came the destruction of the Second Temple. What happened was, after the destruction of the Second Temple, it became clear to the rabbis that the Jewish people are going to be now going into a very prolonged exile that won't end so fast. They knew that this was not going to end that quick, and there's going to be a long time. Jews are going to be now dispersed all around the world. Little by little, they're going to be all over the globe, and they realized very quickly that they can no longer trust that the Jewish people would remember the oral law. Because not everyone is learned, not everyone is scholarly, not everyone knows how to find in the words the code hints to the oral law. People are going to be all over the place. They realize that if they don't write down everything that was passed down orally, it will definitely be forgotten in a very short amount of time. And that's when Rabbi Yehuda, the great sage who lived in the 2nd century, wrote down the whole entire oral law. And that's what we call today the Talmud, the Mishnah and the Talmud. That is basically a record, a recording of the entire oral law. So today nothing is passed down orally anymore. Today it's all written. But it wasn't that way for the first 1400 years of Jewish history. It was passed down orally, and we could rely that the oral tradition is accurate because it was passed down by geniuses, by holy men, together with a code book called a written Torah that hints, every word there hints to another aspect of the oral law right away. If you only had the written Torah without the oral Torah, you wouldn't know what to do. They both complement each other. And through the generations, it was passed down loyally by holy men, by loyal people, by people that sacrificed their very self for the preservation of Judaism. And that's how we have it until it reached our day and age. Of course, over the years, the rabbis instituted many new laws and new traditions, meaning new customs, which I want to talk about that next week. What's this whole thing with the rabbinic law? Till now I spoke about biblical law. What in the world is rabbinic law? And why is that binding? Who gives the rabbis the right to dictate what I do and what I don't do? It's one thing if God tells Moses in front of me to tell me what to do. I get it. I can do that. I'll accept that. It's, I was there, I saw it, we heard it, we know that it happened. But who gives the rabbis the right to add on so many different things? And there are today many who say, well, it's only rabbinic. It's not so important. It's not so important. But that's a great fallacy and a terrible mistake. So, of course, I will elaborate on that more, and that's in part 3. But I want to now open this up. Before I go further tonight, I want to open this up for questions. If anyone has a question, this is your chance to do so. Unmute yourself and feel free to ask any questions. I'll wait 30. If no one has any questions, I'll move on.
Okay. I have a question, Rabbi.
Yeah.
You said after the destruction of the second temple, the oral interpretation was written down. Why did it not happen after the destruction of the first temple?
Because after the destruction of the first temple, the question was, why didn't they write it down after the destruction of the first temple? Because the destruction of the first temple only took us out of Israel and brought us to Babylonia. So if instead of being concentrated in Israel, we're now concentrated in Babylonia. But we were still all together. It was only after the second temple that we began to disperse all over the world.
I see. Okay. I understand.
Rabbi, I have a question.
Yeah.
You said that the reason why there's an oral Torah, well, the first thing is a practical reason not to have such a large book. But there's another reason I heard that why you had the oral explanation. Do you have another reason why? I mean, I heard I don't know where, but that God didn't want somebody that pick up this book to know how to handle it without the other explanation. That no other group of people could follow this law except the people that know the oral.
That's a very interesting point. I've never heard that before, but it makes a lot of sense. But I think the more important reason is that the one that I said, that is that it's impossible to write everything down. And what he did write down was in such a way where it supports the oral law. In other words, it hints to oral parts that God told him by word of mouth. So it's interesting that you say that, because he did not want the Gentiles to observe the Torah mitzvahs. I don't know why any Gentile would want to. I mean, this is not, they don't have to. Why would they? By the way, at Sinai, you may ask, at Sinai, did God tell all mankind what he wants from them, or only to the Jewish people? The answer is he told all mankind. I want to, if you can mute yourself.
What do you mean,
I'll tell you. I'll explain to you. All mankind means all peoples, and not just Jews. What I mean by that is, when God spoke to Moses, he gave 613 commandments to the Jewish people, and he also told them at the same opportunity, he said, and I have 7 laws that I want you to share with all mankind. So he gave at Sinai his program for all peoples. And by the way, that was just a repeat, because he did that once before. He told Noach. He already told Noah after the flood 7 basic human laws for all humanity. But Noah, again, Noah only heard it himself from God, and therefore people can argue, did he really hear it? Is he making it up? So it lacked validity to a certain extent. So God now gave it to Moses as well. So then now no one can question whether Moses is making it up or not, because everyone saw that God spoke to him. But it was a repeat, because he already had told Noah those 7 laws. So basically at Sinai, God reaffirmed what he wanted from all of mankind. He had 2 messages. One from the non-Jewish world, 7 basic laws, which have many offshoots, of course. It's not just 7. Those 7 include many more. And then the 613 of the mitzvahs that he gave for all mankind. Now, so 2 points that I made. Number one in this transmission of the oral law, that it's obvious when you read the written law that the written law came along with an oral law. Because when you read the writing, what's written there, you can't understand anything. You wouldn't know what to do. So it's obvious that God gave Moses an interpretation. He explained to him what he wants. So, for example, nowhere in the Torah does it say that tefillin should be black, or tefillin should be square boxes. That God told Moses himself, orally. He told it to him, but he told it to him not to write it down. Just, tell it to them by mouth. That give over orally. But that came from him. That wasn't made up later. That wasn't introduced later. That came straight from him. So therefore, going back to my earlier point about believing in human beings, is it a positive to believe in a human being when he tells you, I spoke to God?
Of course not.
Well, because Jews do. We believe in a lot of things. You know that, right? We believe in all sorts of miracles, all sorts of prophets, and sometimes we don't question them.
But we believe because they are in the Torah, right?
Well, what do we believe because they're in the Torah? They're not in the Torah.
I mean, which one do we believe that is not in the Torah?
None of the prophets are in the Torah. They're all later. Joshua, Isaiah, Jeremiah, Elisha, Eliyahu. There's so many prophets. Samuel. They spoke to the Jewish people, and we accepted what they said. So I said before, why? Because Moses told us that you should accept that. Because, in other words, it starts from Moses. Moses appoints Joshua. Joshua appoints the next one. So it's an unbroken tradition from Moses and on. And he also told us in the Torah to believe. But what happens when someone comes along and says the message changed? We don't have to do the mitzvahs any longer. And he comes and says, he throws a stick on the ground, let's say, and he walks on water or does some other kind of miraculous thing, and he says, by the way, you no longer have to put on tefillin every morning, and you no longer have to keep kosher, and you no longer, there's a New Testament, a new set of laws, and you can forget about the past. What do? Should we believe that? Even if he makes miracles, what do? Obviously, you're going to say no, because we can't change Judaism, right? People ask me all the time, why don't Jews believe in other religions? Let's say Christianity. Why don't we believe in Jesus? I once I'm going to tell you an interesting story that happened with me. It was about 20 years ago, maybe even more, 22 years ago. And I'm sitting in my office in my storefront, and I get a knock on the door. It's the two people, and they were local pastors. They wanted to talk to me. So we sat down in my office, and we had a very long conversation. It lasted 3 hours. And they asked me at some point, quickly in the conversation, Rabbi, why don't you accept Jesus Christ? Well, I'm not used to getting such questions from pastors, and I'm not here I wasn't interested in debating with them so much. I mean, I don't have any reason to question someone else's faith. It's none of my, why would I do that anyway? And I don't do that as a practice. But they asked me the question, and I saw that they were very, they were sincere. They really wanted to know a true answer. So I flipped it back on them. I said, instead of me answering to you why I don't believe in him, you tell me first why you do believe in him. I said, you're intelligent men. You sound like intelligent men. Why would you believe a story like this? That someone was born without a father, only a mother. I asked them, why do you believe this? And they said, well, it says it in the Bible. I said, it says where in the Bible? In the New Testament. Okay. And who wrote the New Testament? Well, the prophets, the apostles, whatever. They heard it from God himself. It was a vision there. I say, okay, I mean, you want to believe what people tell you, be my guest. But the burden of proof is on you. In other words, for me to believe in extraordinary things of that nature, I have to have a reason to believe that. And that conversation was a very memorable conversation. And it was, I'm not going to go, tell you all the details of it, but my point of bringing it up was because it's not the best practice to just believe what people tell you. In fact, the Torah tells us that you should absolutely never believe, especially when someone tells you that he heard from God that you can cancel the mitzvahs. That is blasphemy. And God made that very clear in the Torah, which he gave to Moses. And he said, I'm making sure that there's never going to be this kind of confusion. Because had he not told us that, again, we would be in big trouble. Because again, everyone would come and say, any charlatan can come and say, I heard different, I have a new message, and so on and so forth. So you ask, why do so many people believe that and not this? That's, I can give you many reasons for that. I think that two prime reasons for that is because it was a very, Jews 1,300 years after the Torah was given, during the destruction of the temple, and life was starting to become very difficult for the Jewish people under the Romans, and they're persecuted as Jews. And therefore, Judaism was beginning to become weakened, not because they stopped believing in it, but because it became very difficult to observe. It was sometimes at the cost of your very life. Rabbi Akiva got killed because he studied Torah. and thousands of others. So what do? So couple that with a man that comes and says, by the way, God told me you don't have to do this anymore. That's going to find an audience. That kind of message is going to find an audience of people, even Jews, who are tired a little bit from dying to be Jewish. He said, oh, really? I can believe that. I want to believe that. They were tempted to believe that they don't have to die for Judaism anymore. So he said, oh, God told you, and he even performed some kind of miraculous event in front of them. Oh, then for sure we'll believe it. You can become very quickly, you can succumb to that very easily, especially if now you add to that sometime in the future, not that far, maybe in the next 100 years later, they started forcing conversions to the new religion. So there's other reasons that you can give many reasons why, not many, but these are the two basic reasons why it took off so well. Because you don't have to be burdened with 613 commandments. That's a pretty good sell, right? Who doesn't want to buy that kind of situation? But when you really think about it, it behooves us to think a little deeper what could be true and what cannot be true. There's only one there's only one truth, because if there are more than one truth, there isn't any truth. Because then no one knows the truth anymore. The minute there are different truths going on at the same time, it's all a falsehood. Because because at that point, no one could know the truth anymore for certain. So therefore, God sets this up in such a way where he leaves no room for doubt. And the only way to do that is he gathers everyone around and says, I'm speaking once, and I'm never going to change my mind. I'm never going to come to one man or 10 men and say differently. Then we know, okay, we got it. We know what we have to do. If we have to die for it, we have to live for it. It's hard, it's not hard. You can choose not to follow. And many Jews have chosen not to follow the laws of the Torah. We all know that. But, we all can do, a lot of people do a lot of things, but the truth we know. So it's important to strengthen our understanding of the origins of Torah. And there's no aspect of the Torah today that we have that is not explained. I'm going to devote next week, next Thursday night, to the topic of the rabbinic tradition and why that is so important and what that is and why it's binding and is it binding and what does it mean that Ashkenazim don't eat rice on Pesach and Sephardim do eat rice on Pesach. How does that make any sense? Isn't it one Torah for all? That's a problem that causes a lot of confusion, no? But it only causes confusion when we don't know the origins of all of these things and how these things develop. But when you do find out, and hopefully I'll be able to share that information with you next week, that will it'll all become clear. But again, I'm going to conclude for today. It's 9:20, so I'm going to ask if anyone, I'll stay on. If anyone has
Rabbi,
a question, please feel free.
Rabbi, I have a question.
Go ahead.
In the beginning of your lecture, you talked about God put us here for a purpose. I always felt that God put us here to make the world a better place.
That's true.
He gave the earth to us.
What did he do?
He made us the caretakers, I believe.
Of the earth, yeah, okay. Yeah, he did. That's true. That is true.
And presently, the earth is sick in some ways because of pollution and all the other modern things that have been happening for the last couple generations. So I think in some ways we failed, as people of the earth, no matter what religion you are.
Well, 1 second. Let me understand that, because
Okay.
let me just repeat that question, because for all
Sure.
the people watching on Facebook Live, the question was that isn't the purpose that we should be the caretakers of the world, of the earth? And it seems that we are failing as humans in our mission, because the earth is sick with pollution and other, I guess, pollution. What else? Anything else? The ice caps are all melting, or whatever. Whatever. I get it. Well, that's an interesting question. Well, let me say this. Would you say that we've made the world a better place to live in since Adam, or have we gone downhill?
That, no, I think we've gone downhill.
You do? Okay. So let me understand.
I don't agree.
That's an interesting point you make. Let me understand your point, because it's important. So here we are. I'm speaking in front of a computer, and you're all listening through a computer or a phone on Facebook, and we take it for granted that this is happening. But this is a marvel of man's ingenuity and the development of our physical world, the earth that God gave us. Mankind has uncovered in the last just 200 years in the most incredible potential that the world that we've ever seen. Adam can only dream to have a world so developed like we have brought it, have to the state that we have brought the world. Now, that comes along with a lot of machinery and a lot of, that's going to cause certain elements of the world there's deficiencies, like you call it, that's sick. I don't want to get into the politics of it, obviously, but I'm not going to get into the argument right now of global, of all this, this whole thing. But I think everyone can agree, if we're talking in terms of the last 6,000 years since Adam and since creation, I think it's pretty clear that mankind has done a pretty good job in making the world a more hospitable place for mankind and a more hospitable place for even God. Now, does that mean that we have a lot of work that we still have a lot of work to do? Of course, Mashiach didn't come yet. If we would have finished the job, Mashiach would have been here already, and we would be in redemption. That didn't happen yet, so we have a long way to go. There's still a lot of garbage out there, and a lot of negativity, and guess what? With the development of technology and everything that we have, which I call a great progression, with that comes along so much negative as well. You can go, every kid today has at the palm of his finger, of his hand, has the worst of the worst, right? In this little, 4-inch by 2-inch machine, the phones, which we call smartphones, you can debase yourself terribly. There's so much negativity on here, but there's so much positive as well. Yeah, there's an important point you have to understand. God never takes away from us the freedom to choose. That's the fundamental truth of everything. If we don't have freedom to choose, He doesn't need us here. He has animals for that. Creatures that don't have the freedom to choose, He has enough of that. He has elephants and lions and monkeys and dogs and cats. He has all kinds of creatures that He, that don't have freedom to choose. He wants human beings. Human beings, by definition, the big difference between us and animals and all other creation is that we have intelligence, and therefore we can choose between right and wrong. That means like this: when we develop the world, when we enhance the world, we bring it out of its concealed potential to its revealed, state where it is now. You're going to always have the ability to utilize that in the most negative way. So, for example, the atom bomb, that's basically using the development and the uncovering of the secrets of the world in the most negative way, if you use it in a way that you shouldn't. But on the other hand, the atom energy, the atomic energy, is the most incredible thing in the world, one of the most incredible things. And the same thing with all these potentials and all these new developments. That doesn't mean for a second that we took away mankind's freedom to choose. We can choose to use it for its ultimate purpose, which is what God wants it to. That means like this. If I asked you the question, and I think Michelle asked that question, right? That was you, Michelle, right? If I asked you the question, did God, is it a good thing that we develop, is it a good thing that we developed the internet?
Of course.
Of course. But you know how many kids are doing terrible things because of the internet? But no one in his right mind is going to suggest that therefore we shouldn't have internet. That is a great development, a great achievement of mankind. That is a great step forward in making tikkun olam. Wouldn't you agree? And it's the same with atomic energy. It's the same with everything. We have done a marvelous job in tikkun olam, in bringing the world out of it from its potential to its actuality, to uncover the hidden potential of the world. Who's done it? Mankind has done it, with the help of God, of course. So we have done a masterful job in perfecting the world. But there's a lot of people that are utilizing this perfection in the very opposite way, in this perfecting, not perfection, in this developed new energy, or this developed new thing, the internet or whatever it may be, for negative purposes. So you're going to blame now the person who, let's take whether it's aviation, the light bulb, electricity. These are all tremendous developments. That's tikkun olam. That's what we call tikkun olam. Tikkun olam is we've done a lot of that. But could you use electricity for terrible things? Sure. You can use aviation for terrible things. 9/11, and etc., etc., etc. So we shouldn't confuse the two things. I don't think mankind is doing a bad job. Could we do better? Perhaps, of course. Like I said, if we would perfect the world, we would be in the time of redemption already. And the fact that we're not there means we have a job to still accomplish. So, and guess what? What is the most important part of the universe that God wants to develop? The human mind. The human mind has the greatest potential, and it has the greatest potential and the worst potential. And I don't want to get into that now, but it's only the human mind that can do good, and only the human mind that can do bad. So it's all up to the human mind, and really that's really the job of all mankind, to perfect, to make the world a better world, and to use our mind in that to those ends, and not to use it, God forbid, for the opposite, for an opposite agenda, God forbid. So, tikkun olam is an important thing, and tikkun olam, by the way, starts with tikkun ha'adam, right? If you want to really change the world, you have to change yourself. And if you can change yourself, then you'll change your family, then you'll change your neighborhood, then you'll change your city, then you'll change your county, then you'll change your state, and then your country, and then the world. It's not the other way around. You don't start with tikkun olam, the whole world, and then when I realize when I'm 80 that I really didn't have much effect on the whole world, then you say, maybe I should try to affect myself. Start the other way around. Let's try to perfect ourselves, to work on ourselves, to make ourselves better people. And then it extends outward, not inward. That's just a side note. But, Michelle, your question is a good question. I hope I answered it.
Thank you, Rabbi, for your explanation.
Yeah, you're welcome. Anyone else?
Hi, Rava.
Hi.
Good evening, Rava. Good evening, everybody.
So we have a question, actually. You were talking about the oral Torah. As we know in our knowledge, the woman doesn't read like the Talmud. So we want to know who told us the oral Torah. That's our question.
One second. You're saying that you want to know who gave us over the oral Torah? Because
yeah, the oral Torah.
Moses gave it to us.
Okay, but in our day-to-day, like our everyday, who tell us the oral Torah? Like it's not.
Today you don't have to be told. You can learn it in the books. You can read the book. It's all written today.
Okay,
I mean, why do you think I have these classes? I'm happy to pass on to you my knowledge, and there's thousands of classes online, similar classes, the great teachers. You don't need. You can go look in the books itself. It's all written today. But your comment that women don't learn Talmud, that's not true anymore. The women should learn Talmud.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
You're
that
welcome.
was our question.
Okay. All right. I'll take one more, and then we'll call it a night. Anyone else? Okay. So.
Rabbi,
Yeah.
I just want to say one comment about the hesitation whether man has done good or bad. You look at the statistics. I mean, how many people were poor 200 years ago? It's like 80% of the people were poor. Now it's only 10%. How long did
I don't know if
live?
it's 10%. 10% of the people are poor today. Not more.
Extreme poverty. It's called extreme poverty.
Extreme poverty. Okay.
Used to be. It's coming down in the last 100 to 150 years.
Okay.
How long did people live 200 years ago? How long do people live now?
There's no
How do
question.
people interact?
There's
To me, there's no question.
no question about it.
But there are also there's side effects.
The world has made. Mankind has made tremendous progress. Tremendous progress.
Yes.
There's no doubt about that. I mean, people get. This idea of global warming and what's going to be. Are we ruining the planet? Whatever. I get that. I'm not here to argue one way or the other on that particular point. But we got to look at the bigger picture, which is it's incredible what we have done.
Absolutely. And there are going to be side effects, but the overall benefit of the world is much better than those side effects.
For sure, without a doubt.
Yes, and I'm sure those side effects are going to be corrected in the future. I mean, global warming to me is going to be corrected by technology. Once we eliminate the gas, oil consumption, that's going to go down significantly. I mean, you can look at this 2-3 months, what's happened to the world. Imagine if we can, yeah. So I think I'm confident. I'm confident we're going to solve.
Like I said, I'm not going to get too deep into the topic of global warming and if mankind is to blame for it, and if God is to blame for it, or if there's even any whatever. If it's even it's totally something that I don't want to. I don't really worry too much about it. My personal, I believe in God, and the world is not coming to an end. As far as I can see, anytime soon. That's just my personal feeling. You can argue, what do you know? You're probably right. I don't know much about it, but I don't lose sleep over it, to be honest with you.
Yeah, and if I may, Rabbi, I just want to ask you a question regarding what's going on now. What is the consensus interpretation, or why is this brought to us now, the coronavirus? Is there a discussion from the rabbis or interpretation in the Torah? Or why is it happening?
So I'll tell you like this. To tell you that if anyone tells you, I know why this happened, this is why God made this happen, he probably doesn't know. He's just made. He really does. No one really knows. But we are we are commanded in the Torah that when something happens of this nature, something so global, or personally, when something significant happens in a person's life, for bad or for good, it behooves us to say to ourselves, wait a minute, what's going on? What message is God sending me? You see, the Rambam Maimonides says that if a person just dismisses it as it's a fluke of nature, it happened, in a lab in Wuhan, or from a bat, or from this or from that. Yeah, that may be how it, triggered. But God is running the world, and if God is making it so that we should all suffer from this thing, there's a message. What's the message? I'm not here to tell you that God is punishing us, because I don't know that He is. And who am I to say that anyway? I'm not, God didn't hire me to be His advocate. I don't need to defend God and say, oh, He's doing this because He's right, we deserve this. He doesn't need me to say that. And I'm not here to say that we deserve it. I'm not saying that at all. What I'm saying is, this is a reality, it's happening, and what are we doing about it? The question shouldn't be why. The question should be what. Instead of asking, why is God doing this, you got to ask, what can I do about it? That's the only real relevant question. How is it going to change me? I'm going to become a better person, hopefully. Maybe God wants us to recognize that He is in control. Maybe He wants us to become more connected to Him, and this is our way to do it. This is His way of doing it, forcing us to stop doing everything we're doing and think about the priorities of life. Maybe, even if, whether or that's His intention or not, if millions and millions of people are thinking today what they've never thought before about the priorities in life, about the more deeper things, that's a net gain. That's a tremendous gain for the world. And I truly believe that when this is over, and I've spoken to many people, that's all I do now, speak to people on the phone. And I've heard so many perspectives, I've heard so many different people say so many different things. But some of the things I'm hearing from many, many people, that's more or less across the board, is that even when life does go back to the way it was, it'll never be the same for them. I mean, ideologically and philosophically, it's not that they're not going back to the way they were. That's the way they're expressing themselves right now. I hope, indeed, that sticks, that remains. The human being has an interesting way of, forgetting the past. But be that as it may, people aren't forced to think. So if people are going to realign their priorities, I think that's a tremendous gain. Is that why God did this? He didn't tell me, and I'm not His spokesman, and He never hired me for that. I can only relate to you what I know to be true from the Torah, and that is that when such a thing does happen, it behooves us to take it to heart and to say, how can this be a lesson for me? Well, one of the lessons is I have very little control. God runs this world. If I never knew it, now I know it. Also, I've been locked up in my house for the last 6 weeks. I lived pretty okay without a restaurant. I lived pretty okay without going to the movie theater. I could survive without going to a baseball game. And I could survive without flying across the world for a vacation. So what is my life about? Well, it's not about vacations anymore. Certainly not. That I know now. So what is it? Well, you're in your house. You have a family. You have the things that are more important. The things maybe God wants us to recognize that Judaism has to be lived in your house, not in the synagogue. An old truth. Maybe many people don't know that, but this is the truth. Judaism was never meant to be observed in the synagogue. That's not what that was never the center of Judaism. People feel they're not aligned well right now. Well, there's no synagogue, so I don't know how to express my Judaism. Well, that's exactly the message. Your Judaism was never meant to be something that you do only in the synagogue. The synagogue was a sidebar. I don't know if you know that, but that's the truth. It was a very small part of Judaism. The real Judaism was lived in the home. That's where you lit Shabbos count. That's where you kept Shabbos. That's where you had Shabbos. That's where you had kosher kit. That's where you had everything. If I told you that my mother went to synagogue twice a year, I wouldn't be exaggerating. That's how many times she went. 3 times. In the years, for the many of the years that we were growing up, my mother went to shul 3 times a year. She was the ultra religious woman. So you may ask, what does that mean? It means exactly that. She didn't need the synagogue for her Jewish expression and for her Jewish life. Because that's not where Jewish life is observed. It's the place where people go to daven in the morning and the evening. And if they have a Torah study session, they go there, and that's great. But where's life? Where's Jewish life? Is in the home. It always was. So maybe mankind is learning that now. If the Jewish people are learning that now, that's a net gain. You can ask, is that why God made the coronavirus happen? He never told me that. But if that's the takeaway, it's a great takeaway. And there are many takeaways. And that's all we can do, is see what we can take away from every event. And I've taken away a lot from this. I've learned a lot from this experience. About myself, about my relationship with my family, about my relationship with God, with my relationship with my community. I've learned a lot from these last 6 weeks. I have to be honest with you, I hope it comes to a quick end, because all the benefits, this is not the way we want it. And this is obviously, a deviation from normal. But while we're in it, let's take advantage of the silver lining that's in it. And there is a silver lining in it. I have to tell you, my sons, from when they hit 14 years old, they leave the home, and I get to see them a week here, a week there. That's it. I can't tell you how much I'm enjoying having my 11 children home for 6 weeks already. I can't get enough of it. Do I not want this to be over so that they can go back to the yeshiva where they belong? I want it over, and even if it means I have to see them off to the yeshiva again. But while it's happening, I can't tell you how much I'm enjoying it. So it's a mixed bag. It's a mixed bag. But for you, I think the answer is, don't ask why, ask what can I do about it? Because you'll never get the answer to why. You have a good shot at getting the answer what. Because only you can answer that question. What are you going to do about it? Let's not waste time with whys, let's spend time with what. And then Michelle will have more of Tikkun Olam. Okay? So it's 20 to 10.
Yes, you're right, Rabbi. Thank you.
I'll say good night to everyone. Thank you all for watching and listening. And I hope you learned something tonight.
Thanks, Rabbi. See you in the morning.
Good
Thank
night.
you.
Take care.
Thank you. Thanks, Rabbi. Good night.
Take care. Oops, what happened over here? How did my camera flip? Okay, I don't know.